It's that time again. It's the ShopNotes Podcast. This is episode number 219. I'm your host, Phil Huber, along with Logan Whitmer and John Doyle today, the usual cast of suspects. We're going to be talking about design details, current projects and magazines, and an update on the Jointer saga. It's kind of like one of those old Viking tales, except involving giant cast iron antique power tools. So you want to stick around for that. Thanks everybody for listening to this episode. Want to give a little shout out here. This episode of the ShopNotes Podcast is sponsored by Harvey Industries. Good enough is not good enough. See all of our tools at harveywoodworking.com. I also want to extend an invitation to folk out there. I'll put a link to it in the show notes page, but we're doing an England tour this year, later in September. So if you missed out on the opportunity for last year's tour, you want to check that out. I'm going to be going. Mike Pekovich from Fine Woodworking is going to be coming along as well. We have a full itinerary. You can check that out at the link on the website. So I hope you join us. Come along. All right, let's get started with the usual tradition of reading through some comments from previous episodes. Mike Koff says, the Jointer journey, great story. Had me on the edge of my seat the whole time. Woodtick Greg says, wow, Logan's Jointer story. What an emotional roller coaster ride. Yeah. Daniel Else says, this episode reminds us just how much you guys are like the rest of us. Hole saws, electrical tools, the world of DIY. And I think I'm taking that as a very strong comment or a compliment. Papa's Workshop, awesome tale. I did not fast forward through it. Hope it all turns out well for Logan. Puppy Doc says, so did I hear Logan say he was going to acquire another lathe? Something about trading the stolen joiner for a South Bend lathe? Hi, my name's Logan, and I have a problem. And then Kevin Thomas. I did
imply that.
Kevin Thomas, probably not the same guy from This Old House,
nope.
Says Peyton Place Shop Notes Edition. So there you go. All right. So, any updates on the Jointer?
Nope.
The
Moac is in the shop.
Okay.
It is. I think we were on a call, Phil, and I showed a video flash to you.
Yes.
I think there is no way that this 24-inch will fit in here. At least not as the shop is configured. It's just
cut a little niche in the wall.
There you go.
Like, I mean, I was standing here looking at it like, well, maybe I put it up against the wall where I was playing on the metal lathe going, and then that means I don't have outfeed because the big bandsaw's there. But maybe I move the big bandsaw to the other side of the wall. It's just, no. You know what?
Yeah.
Standing here looking at this 16-inch jointer, this thing's beautiful. Like, this thing is, I like this style of this Moac joiner. I like 24-inch is just overcompensating. Like, don't need that. Don't need it.
Hear me out. 24-inch vertical joiner. So you like stand it on end. You can just like run short pieces through. I don't know.
Yeah.
All right.
Yep. So, yeah. So
I thought you were going to say vertical, like wall mounted, so that it's just flat and you just got to.
Oh, yeah. Or something.
Yep. Yeah. So I actually talked to my guy Sam over at WGM Toolworks yesterday. They have a drawing for a Moac helical head, but he's like, these vintage manufacturers change designs all the time. So he's like, I'm going to send you the drawing. We need you to like tear it apart and verify that it's the right one. So I'm like, do I try to fire it up with this straight knife head in it? at least once before I tear it apart.
I don't know.
I mean,
why not?
Well, that's kind of what I'm thinking. I mean, the problem is with it being a direct drive, like you have to put like a like bearing puller on the end to get the motor to come off. Like there's a lot that has to come off for this head to come out. So kind of like, well, maybe I just like, because he's like, we don't stock a 16-inch Moac jointer. He's like, we have to machine one for you. He's like, no problem, we'll do it.
Yeah.
But like, he's like, you're gonna have to wait for it a little bit. I'm like, that's fine.
Yeah.
So
that sounds like a cha-ching.
You've been waiting on the 24-inch jointer for like 2.5 years now. So
I know.
I bet you have some like wide boards that are just waiting to be jointed.
Right.
They are.
Just like,
full crotch boards.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, when you did show us on that call the other day, the Moac in place, I do really like the look of that jointer. It's
the three-legged jointers are really cool.
It's a very nice looking machine, and I feel like it does fit really well with your Powermatic planer.
They nest together really nicely.
They make a great pair.
Yeah, they nest together really nicely. Quite honestly, I would like a little bit bigger planer, but I just don't think that is going to happen, nor should it happen in the space. I mean, maybe like, so the problem with the power, so this is the Powermatic 180. So they have the Powermatic 100, 180, and 220. So it was basically a 12-inch, an 18-inch, and a 24-inch of this size planer. And the design, the power unit sticks off to, as you're the operator, the power unit, the motor sticks to the left-hand side. So it kind of sticks out like into open space. It's kind of in the way, where if you look at some older planers like a Fay and Egan, any of the other, vintage planer manufacturers, the motors were all pretty much tucked underneath the base. So like you might have a wider planer that has the same footprint. So maybe I could see that happening at some point. Something that has a little bit more compact footprint, but not at this time. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, but I mean, like an 18-inch joiner or 16-inch joiner, 18-inch planer.
That makes sense.
Like that's a good pairing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I go to sell it, I sell it as a bundle, and then I bring the bigger stuff in.
Right. There you go. After you do an entire workshop reconfiguration, like the world's heaviest tile puzzle.
Yeah. I was thinking, like, it would be a little crazy, but you could put like the 16 or the 24-inch jointer would fit really nicely next to the table saw. Like, that's a lot of unused real estate. Now, I use that for camera equipment all the time, so I can't do that with what I do every day. But like, if I ever stop doing camera stuff, like, heck yeah, put that bad boy right there. If I stop doing camera stuff, I could do whatever I wanted in the shop from a layout standpoint, but not going to happen right now.
Right.
So,
but if you put the joiner on that side, going from like jointing to planing,
yes, issue.
Then all of a sudden you have like transportation issues.
Yeah. I will say, having that, and I'm pretty sure, I don't remember what Jamil Abrams has for jointer. I think it's either a Porter or a Moac, something along those lines. Because there's a popular woodworking blog post from him several years ago talking about, how it's the best workbench he's ever had. Because it's like, he's like, yeah, you see my jointer? It's acting like a workbench right now, or something along those lines. And having that thing sit right next to the planer is a really good landing spot for like planing boards. It's like feed it through, grab it, set it on the jointer because it's right there and it's a big cast iron surface.
Yeah, it's not going to tip over.
Nope. So it is pretty cool though. I do like that tripod style. Moac did it. I think American Machinery Company did it. The Porter did it. There were a few of them that did that style. So the only one I think that looks better, I like the Oliver 166 jointers, or the Oliver style jointers. They have two pedestals. They have a pedestal under the left hand, right hand side. But it's very cool. Tables cleaned up beautifully. The tables had some surface rust on them. And I think I've mentioned this before. Like, I bought this surfacing tool from Harbor Freight. It's basically a handheld drum sander. It uses these big drums.
Okay.
And they're like flap drums, kind of. But if you put the stripping drum on there for like stripping paint and stuff, it surfaces cast iron beautifully. And it just peels off rust. So.
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
All right. We'll put a link to that tool in the show notes page as well. Let's see, John, how about an update from you?
I knew you were going to ask me questions. I don't know, like, seems like we've just been kind of hitting the TV show pretty hard here the last few months. So that's kind of been the main thing for me. And then when we're not filming, it's like trying to catch up on my real job. It's like, what do I got going on this week? So reader's tips, I think, we got coming up. So that's the thing the closest burner. So it's always fun.
Yeah, we're doing a couple of outdoor projects for the episode that we're filming this week. And in a strange twist of fate, we're actually filming a project before it appears in the magazine.
So hopefully it all works out.
Yeah. Even though by the time the episode airs, it will then have appeared in the magazine.
The timeline self-corrects. So
yes. Yeah. Loki's back there just pulling on different threads. He's going to get it sorted.
Yeah. I feel like, did we have a project maybe last season that was like had either just been published or was in the process
the drill
of
press
being
table.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Cause I think the one that we made on the TV show ended up being the one photographed because it was all set up in the shop there. So it was kind of co-happening between the TV show and so maybe eventually we can sync up and it's just like doing it one time and it's just magazine, TV show, everything. Wow. Who knows?
That would be crossing the streams.
Yep. It's impossible.
The other project that we have is a garden tower that Chris designed. He built it, or he did a prototype of it, designed it, and we featured it in the magazine. And it's a really cool project. And you do kind of lattice panels on each of the four sides. So there's a lot of angled cutting that goes on. So even though it's I would say a relatively simple project, there are a ton of steps in terms of cutting angled dados and half laps and stuff like that. So,
yeah, that's one of those that you got to stay on your toes as far as your lefts and your rights and which way it's angling and all that stuff. So you don't end up with all right sides or left sides or whatever.
Yeah. There's a finial on the top that Chris did on the original as just a bandsaw thing, but we're going to have a special guest appearance by Logan on this episode to turn one. So
we are?
Yes.
Surprise.
When's that happening?
Right now.
Well, Bailey was trying to call you and let you know that she wanted you to do, I think it was just going to be some B-roll. So not really as a segment.
Okay, so it can happen whenever.
Right. This is how we plan our TV shows.
Mhm.
You know, from what you see on the broadcast on your local public television station, looks like we know what we're doing, when in reality, we sort of just scratch it out in the dirt
Mhm.
and then
It's
just
all
run with it.
smoke and mirrors and editing.
Yep. So we have that kind of guinea pig cage smell in here with the Western red cedar being chipped up around. So, which, as we all know, Western red cedar is not a cedar. It's a cypress.
And Eastern red cedar is a juniper.
Right.
Imposters.
That was one of my favorite discoveries of 2024. Is we did that trip out to Washington to the global headquarters of Grizzly. And then I picked up a book on trees of the Northwest or something like that, kind of as a souvenir of the trip, and was reading that on the plane and found out that there are no native cedars in North America. So Western red cedar, cypress. Alaska yellow cedar, cypress.
Isn't that true about fir trees too? Are they like the only real fir trees are in Lebanon or something like that? I don't know. I think I learned that in college.
Could be. I don't know. I think we're not doing fur anymore.
No,
you want
it's all faux fur.
Faux fur, yeah.
Because real fur, that's cruel.
Downfall of our society. Don't get me started on this.
And go.
All right. Perfect. So anyway, a lot of cedar, a lot of Tight Bond 3 getting applied around here. So it will be a delight to watch Logan turn a finial, because it'll have to be a cedar finial. So
my favorite chippy wood.
Yep. So out of curiosity, just because I don't turn much, and any turning that I do is just with carbide turning tools, aka scrapers. For something like a softwood like cedar, in order to turn it, do you just have to just crank that baby up and do it at a high speed?
Yep, and a skew chisel.
Right.
Yep, that's probably how I'm going to do that, is crank it as high as it will go. Probably rough it down with a roughing gouge. I mean, I could rough it down with a skew chisel, but the cleanest cuts will come with a skew chisel.
Okay.
For sure. So
yeah.
So not get real fancy with it.
Right. We had done some prototyping of outdoor projects years and years ago, and I have it as shop art in my workshop. Cedar finial. I mean, it's a ball that's like, a little bit smaller than a volleyball, probably size, that comes down to a base. And then another one that I think is more like acorn shaped or something. And I've always wondered how those got turned. I mean, they're probably done on basically CNC lathes or whatever, but
yeah. A lot of times what you'll see like a ball mill, like in a router, turning as the piece is turning as well.
Oh, sure.
So you kind of have this like router lathe type combination thing going on.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Want to give a little shout out here. This episode of the ShopNotes Podcast is sponsored by Harvey Industries. Good enough is not good enough. See all of our tools at harveywoodworking.com. All right, now before we started our broadcast here, the recording, Logan, you were talking about, since this is your second podcast now in your office.
Yeah.
About some of your desk designs.
Yeah.
Because I think originally you were going to go with a different style of desk, and then based on the trim that you put up right there behind you, the window
Mhm.
trim casings. Decided to go with more of a stickly craftsmanish version.
Yeah, like I'm a huge fan of the shaker style. And shaker stuff's super fast to build generally. Very simple, right? I mean, it was designed for like mass production. So I was just gonna do like a little desk, kind of based loosely upon the splayed leg shaker table I did a couple years ago. Just tapered legs, apron, maybe a drawer, maybe 2 drawers if I get crazy, and a top. But then I'm like, okay, that would look a little odd in this office where everything is oak. I have a Limbert bookcase here next to me. I have been keeping an eye out for like a prairie or craftsman style couch to go back here. Like that's just going to look like hodgepodge out of place. So instead, let's use a bunch of this bur oak that I've cut that's quarter sawn. Maybe not the highest grade stuff because it is bur oak. It's not a super high quality white oak, but it's very cool looking. Let's use some of that and make a stickly style desk. So I found a picture of a vintage stickly piece that I really like, and I'm loosely basing this design on, but like I'm looking. So the only things I have are photos from an auction where this thing sold, and I'm reading the dimensions off, and I'm like 36 inches deep by 72 inches long. Like
Whoa.
This is a big, giant, freaking rectangle top. And so while I was waiting for everybody to get on the podcast, I'm like in here with a tape measure measuring it. I'm like, this SOB is going to be so big. Like it's going to dominate this entire room. So I am currently whipping a UE, and I'm going to go smaller, much smaller. Not much smaller, but I am going to go like, I think 30 inches on the top. So I'm going to give myself probably an inch overhang on the back. So that way the top can butt right up against the wall. I'm going to do the standard kind of corbel, the stickly corbel styles on the ends. So I'll have overhang left and right, a little bit overhang on the back, a couple inches of overhang on the front. But most stickly furniture and all vintage desks are adorned with drawers left and right. So you have kind of the 3 drawer system, or maybe a small drawer and then 2 deep drawers on each side. I think I'm trying to figure out, and I'm going to have to get back into a SketchUp model because I lost my SketchUp model I had. I must not have saved it, which was really annoying because it was almost all done. But instead of doing drawers, I'm going to do a swing out door so I can put like my small computer in there.
Oh, yeah. That'd work good. Yeah, because usually, I mean, for modern, laptops and stuff like that, you don't need.
Well, and my work computer is a little Mac box. It's a Mac Studio, so it's small. My personal PC is small. It would fit in there. Then it requires probably bringing some form of ventilation in there. So it's like, okay, can I figure out some form of slat front that looks like a Craftsman style front, that has slats on it or something? I don't know.
Maybe.
We'll have to play around with some stuff and see. But I think that's where I'm going. So it's going to be like modern stickly style. I guess a stickly style for the modern office. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. So.
Because are the sides frame and panel?
Sides are frame and panel. Yep. Sides and back are frame and panel.
So you could do maybe like a frame and panel on the sides, but then have a little bit of a air gap between the panel and the rail or something. So you could, a couple of holes in the bottom.
I was actually thinking like doing for the front door, instead of doing like a frame and panel front door, do a bunch of styles, right? A bunch of vertical styles.
Yeah.
That are half lap together, but the half laps are big enough that it's actually a gap, but you can't see the gap.
Okay.
So it could pull air through it. I don't know. This is all work in progress. Yeah.
And be kind of a feature. I like that.
Yeah. So I don't know. We'll see. It's probably going to require a bunch of mock-ups Thankfully, this Baroque is not chippy at all. It doesn't like to tear out. God, I've been fighting these locked miters. Stupidest thing ever.
Just pick
That's what I was going to
open knot holes for air ventilation.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I was going to ask you about next, is because you had talked about, you were in the studio here the other day and were lamenting the woes of the lock miter router bit.
Yep.
Which we're not calling out anybody's specific lock miter bit. This is a broad brushed screed against the joint as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I think in concept, it's a beautiful joint.
Okay.
I think if you were building stuff out of MDF, heck yeah, use the crap out of it.
Sure.
But it is so finicky to set up. I think it works really well. I have 2 of the 4 legs, when I glued them up, were beautiful. 2 of the 4 were not. Was that small variance in material thickness? Did the bit slip a little bit? Your guess is as good as mine is. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I got a workaround on it. They look great. I just actually, before we podcasted, was sanding the legs. They look great. They look as great as rustic number 3 Baroque can look, because there is some little swirlies and weird stuff in there, but they look good. But yeah, it's like the idea behind that lock miter is that it's a miter joint, but the tongue locks everything together so it doesn't slip. It's easy to clamp. It's one setup to make all the parts.
Right.
They don't tell you that there's about 14 setups before that final setup, as you're testing everything. And like I got the setup down packed. I think like it's like you make a cut, you cut it apart, slip it back together, see if it's flush. Do the same thing with the face. Like you can get it there. It's just to be completely honest, I know a lot of the issue is coming because of this Baroque, because it is not an easy material to work with. So if I was doing this out of like walnut or cherry, I don't think I'd have any issues.
Yeah, and if you have relatively straight grained material that doesn't wave around even within the board.
Correct.
Yeah. I mean, part of the issue with that joint is not only is it forming an interlocking joint between the two pieces, but it's also trying to plow away a lot of waste material at the same time.
And that's maybe the bigger issue with this Baroque is you're taking out huge chunks. You're basically mitering whatever your thickness is. This particular bit I'm using can do, I think, what did it say, between 3/8 and like 7/8 material.
Yeah.
So imagine mitering that. You're taking off a lot of material and you're doing it all in one big chunk. So it wants to tear it.
Yeah. So who among us would, or in any kind of router advice, are you going to say, hey, you need to route a 3/4 inch chamfer? One pass. Just do it in one pass.
Exactly.
It's fine.
Yeah. And I am also doing this on my new Harvey shaper. So it's turning at 11,000 RPM instead of, maybe 18,000 RPM. So it's also, that's not helping, but the setup was much better there than it was at the router table.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's fun. But and people might be like, well, why don't you just cut the legs out of solid stock? I didn't, Karen, because I wanted quarter sawn faces on every face. Plus, I need something extra to talk about in the article, right? Like I need to be I don't need to, but like being able to expand out on this project with this technique article is a good tie-in.
Right.
So it just is a pain in the ass technique.
Yeah.
So
now, John, we've talked about and done some projects in the magazine and on the TV show Craftsman Style, where we've tried to do to get that quarter sawn figure on all four faces. And we've done it in different ways too, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I was trying to think of, we did the library table, and I don't remember if that was the way Logan is showing now, where it's like all mitered together. The other times we've taken quarter sawn boards and then kind of like veneered the sides with, 1/8 inch quarter sawn material and kind of wrap it that way. But yeah, it's always a struggle of how do I get a thick leg, that looks good on four sides.
Black beans and rice, John. Yeah. That's how.
THICK, not THICC.
Right. I believe we have found our title for the podcast.
So like, I don't know if those joints show up at all on there or not. Yep. But this particular bit is a little oversized in the locking area where they call it a glue relief. So it's like, so the glue doesn't hold the joint apart.
Sure.
But yeah, so the idea is that, every face is quarter sawn instead of, you would have quarter sawn on two faces and then flat sawn on the others. Or if you do like riff sawn, then you can maybe get like quarter sawn on two faces and riff sawn on the others. It's just, it's a very tedious thing. I'm very happy with how they look, and I chamfered the edges slightly. The biggest problem I'm running into with this burr oak, I saw in the area, is stuff like that, where it just chips out a little bit on the edge, what would be that very sharp edge. So I have a little bit of a gap that's going to need some filling. Thankfully, we got a video coming up with Durham's water putty that I'm going to have plenty of props for.
Well, I will say that this issue isn't limited to making large furniture legs either, because if you're going to use quarter sawn white oak or quarter sawn red oak, whatever, on a project, say, well, for example, like the top of your desk, if you find really nice quarter sawn boards for the top, and you have a top that's probably going to be like an inch and a quarter thick, maybe, if to make it look substantial. Now that front edge of your desk is flat sawn. So it's like, what do you do there? Do you put a strip on that? I think that's one of those things that sneaks up on people when they're building a project, because they're picking out the boards based on that show face, more or less. And then all of a sudden you get it done and you're like, oh, geez, like, look at that edge. And there it is.
I'm looking at the vintage one, flipping through the photos. That's exactly how the vintage ones are. There is a plain sawn face, big old cathedrals right on that front edge. It's like, dumb.
And it takes away from the look of it, if that's what you're going for. So you either have to account for it somewhere, or find riffs on where you get 45 degrees so you can at least get riffs on that front edge.
Yeah. But looking at like, the drawer framework around the drawer fronts, those are all flat sawn as well. It's just one of those things. It's like, who's got time to mess with that?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, we got to draw the line somewhere.
Yeah. Yep. But yeah, I do really enjoy this material because it has a great color. It's like us, very quirky. You don't. It's like, oh, like this could be really cool, but it's not quite there yet.
Yeah, that's us.
I know. So, like, I do really like it. The next thing is going to be like, how do you finish it to make the most out of it? Do you do like a stickly finishing schedule or an arts and crafts finishing schedule like we did on this Limber on the TV show? Do I do something that's just super simple, like doing a, medium walnut Danish oil on it? Maybe I do I do like, so whenever it seems to be, and I could be wrong on this, but it seems to be that whenever Mike does any of his craftsman style stuff, he's just shellacking stuff generally.
Yes. Shellac and water locks.
Yeah, and like I kind of like that look too, so maybe I do that. But then I end up with I'll end up with all this different colored furniture in the office, which doesn't really matter. But
no, but I mean, at least you have the unifying theme that the style of all the pieces have a family resemblance, whereas the specific color reflects either the piece itself or just the diversity within that look.
Yeah.
So I think that part makes it coherent.
Yep.
Whereas I think if you had everything exactly the same color in a small room like that, would feel a little too Embassy Suites.
Yeah, that's fair. That is fair.
So, all right, cool.
Yeah.
So I know you're doing this for a magazine project for Pop Wood. Do you get to a point like when you're struggling with the lock miter joint where all of a sudden you're just like, and we're going to cover up the camera because we don't want to see this part?
No, because I can get I guess that's maybe the more frustrating part, is that the issues I'm having are my own, like just getting into workflow and just not paying attention. I think that is the bigger issue. The chipping you can't get away from. You can't get away from that. But like, if I'm just, I've been wearing these. This is not sponsored at all, but these are one of my favorite things. These 3M headphones, they're Bluetooth. So like I've been wearing those, just listening to music or having a TV show going on in the background, as I'm working. And I'll be, singing along in my head, and I'll be like, oh, that board's drifting up a little bit. I'm not keeping enough down pressure, even though I got like feather boards and roller guides and stuff in place. But like, I guess that's more of my issue. Like, if I'm diligent about it, it works fine.
Yeah.
It's just you have to be on your A game to get it to work fine. So no, I will show the setup and how I got the setup done. Because like this one, glue lines on this guy, perfect, absolutely perfect.
Yeah,
there's only that one area of chip out, and that was just the material. That's not anything I can control necessarily. So I don't mind showing it because, if you follow the setup, no problem.
Yeah. So when you have a leg like that where it ends up being hollow, when you start joining other components to it, do you add filler blocks to the inside, or are you just going with? Okay.
Because my stub tenons are going to be 3/8 of an inch.
Sure.
So there's plenty of material there still.
Oh yeah.
And I'm not plowing a groove the whole length of the leg. It's only going maybe half of it.
Yeah.
So I know a lot of people will add filler blocks, but if I was going to go back and add filler blocks at this point, I would probably bevel all the corners, chamfer all the corners on that filler block, and drive it in from the end, because there's glue squeeze out in the corners.
Right.
So, but no, I'm not going to mess around with that. I don't. This leg's already like 7 pounds the way it is.
Yeah.
So,
I was just curious.
Yeah.
Just because I think it would come up as a thought, if somebody wanted to do, your standard quote unquote mortise and tenon construction, if you're going to put an 1.25 inch long tenon in there, then
I get what you're saying with them. Yeah. Yeah. I get what you're saying. Yeah. If you had a big tenon going in there, then maybe, but then I think at that point though, and I don't know, I'd have to sit down and draw out the expansion and contraction, because I think you'd be fighting that.
Sure.
Because then you have like, this is not a real way that a tree grows. So
wait,
like,
what?
I know. So the expansion and contraction right now is kind of circular. So I don't know, like, if you'd run into some expansion and contraction issues. You might.
Yeah.
But right now, with the way that leg's built, it's very stable, at least. So, plus anything over a 3/4 inch tenon, you're just showing off.
It's fair. I mean, you get to do through mortise and tenon on that, and nobody has to worry about what the outside looks like because it's
That's
just
true.
It's through to the inside.
That's right.
So, all right, one final question on the desk is, are you going to use your new favorite technique in that you have the burr oak leg pieces? Will you use red oak plywood panels?
Absolutely
to connect
not.
them?
All the panels are going to be solid wood. All the panels are going to be solid wood because my favorite tool now is my 36-inch bandsaw with a carbide tip blade. And the last issue of the magazine, I did an article on setting up a resaw, like setting up your saw to resaw. So, the blade, the guides, and then I even went as far as to grab a micrometer and resaw a piece and then put a mic on it. And like you can get within like 1,000th of an inch, which like the kerf, the teeth scores on the surface of the material are more than that. So
sure.
It's I'm going to do all solid wood panels. It will all be burr oak. I see John Doyle judging me silently.
Yeah. No, I'm squirming in my seat because I did it again, mixing materials. Last week's project that you were working on for the TV show, the sawtill or whatever.
I forgot about that. It's painted though; it doesn't matter.
It's all painted, and most of it was poplar. And I was just grabbing stuff out of the rack to get this done. And then we get about done, and you're like, I think this isn't poplar. I think this is basswood. So there's one piece of basswood in there, and then just to top it off, we had alder for the drawer fronts and the back panel. And then for the saw holder, it was like a 1/2-inch piece that wasn't sitting right. So then I glued a piece of cherry to the back of that to hold it up. It's like, this is for Logan.
Yep.
Cherry looks like alder, but not quite. But I just grabbed it out of the trash can and was like, I'm just going to glue this on the back here.
I was sanding something, and I'm like, man, this is the nicest working poplar I've ever used. It's not burning. It's sanding like styrofoam. I was on the edge sander. This stuff is like styrofoam. This is like sanding balsa wood. And I'm like, that's because this is a poplar. What the heck?
Yeah, that happens sometimes when we're trying to get it done. Just grabbing stuff out of the rack.
Well, to be honest with you, if it's painted, I don't care. That's why I was like, whatever. But when it's getting stained, and I know that grain's going to look different, nobody else is going to notice but me.
Yeah.
Yep.
But
perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Just perfect.
It wasn't, but that's what made it great.
Yeah. I'll put a photo of it on the show notes page so you can see our, let's call it mixed media sawtill. Paint grade edition. So
we should have that in the magazine, on the back page, a little highlights. It's what doesn't belong here? What's wrong in this picture? See if people can spot it.
How many different wood species can you find on this sawtill?
I will tell you, the number of posts I see on Facebook that are like, hey, what wood is this? The number of varied answers that people get. It's I'm looking at it. I'm like, that is freaking black walnut. Anybody that would say anything different. And then they're like, oh, I think that's tulip poplar. Or, I have some ambrosia maple that looks like that. I'm like, you guys are idiots.
And that's what the internet's for.
It is. And I just don't even I'm like, nope, not gonna even
keep scrolling.
Yep.
All right. There you go. Clock behind me says that it's time to wrap things up here. That's it for another episode of the Shop Notes podcast. Special thanks to Harvey Industrial for supporting the show. You could check out their full line of tools at Logan's shop or online at harveywoodworking.com. Questions, comments, smart remarks, we want to hear from you. You can send us an email, woodsmith@woodsmith.com, or put a comment in the YouTube version of the podcast. Don't forget to check out the show notes page where we'll have some photos and links of some of the things we've been talking about. Thanks, everybody. See you next week. Bye.